Hey everybody, Jimmy Smith doing my pre-fight breakdown for Justin Gaethje, Donald Cerrone. I'm just doing the main event for this one because I think this is such a good fight that it really deserves an in-depth look. And when I look at Cowboy Cerrone and Justin Gaethje, not only is it going to be entertaining, there are so many levels to this fight, to me, tactically and psychologically, that it deserves kind of its own piece. And two of my favorite fighters, Justin Gaethje and Cowboy Cerrone, any true fight fan loves these two guys. And Cowboy Cerrone, to me, is a fascinating character. He's a fascinating picture of a fighter and a person. And him versus Justin Gaethje, I think, is a crossroads in his career. I think it might be the beginning of the end, or a new lease on his career. One of the things Donald Cerrone is known for is that tendency to have two steps forward, one step back, two step forward, one step back. That's been the story of his career. Is this another step forward or is this a big step back? That's the question. I don't have a crystal ball about making predictions for fights. All I can do is walk you, the audience, through my logic, what I'm thinking about as I think about these fights, and then make a pick based on that. So, for Gaethje versus Cerrone, let's start with the tactical side. What each fighter brings. Now, normally, tactically, this is the kind of fighter Cowboy Cerrone has done well against in the past. Justin Gaethje is incredibly aggressive. He's strong, heavy hitter, likes combinations, likes to mix it up. I actually talked to somebody at the UFC Performance Institute who told me, pound for pound, Justin Gaethje is the hardest hitter they've ever had at the Performance Center. Not the hardest ever was Francis Ngannou, but for his size, it was Justin Gaethje. Now, I don't know how they measure that. I assume it's body mass to power, but Justin Gaethje is the hardest puncher they had at the UFC Performance Institute. Interesting stat. But guys who fight like Justin Gaethje typically don't do well against Cowboy. Where Cowboy has trouble, tactically speaking, is against slick, versatile, unorthodox strikers. That's what he has trouble against. Typically, the step forward and bang kind of guy, even guys who are much bigger, he typically does well against. I would put Matt Brown in that category. I would put Mike Perry in that category. Rick Story I'd put in that category. Most of the people who step forward and bang and would just want to throw down, Cowboy does really well against those guys. When you look at the guys who have beaten him, be it Jorge Masvidal, Nate Diaz, Anthony Pettis, tricky, unorthodox. They do something most fighters don't do. And I'm trying to stick to the guys who can at least make 155. Darren Till, though, slick. Robbie Lawler did well as a straightforward brawling kind of style, but he was much bigger. Rafael Dos Anjos did well against him with a straightforward power punching kind of style, but there's an element there that I want to get into later, psychologically speaking. But tactically, the fighters that tend to beat Donald Cerrone are cut from a different cloth than Justin Gaethje, tactically speaking. Tony Ferguson, we saw that in his last fight. Versatile, unorthodox, tricky. Donald Cerrone tends to shut down against those kind of guys. There are almost two Donald Cerrones. There's the great cowboy and then there's the bad cowboy. And it seems like you get one or the other. And the fights when he loses, he really gets blown up or looks like he kind of checks out or never gets going. And we saw that last time against Ferguson. When he fought Tony Ferguson, I made an emotional pick in that fight and thought Cowboy Cerrone is going to get over this hump eventually. And I thought it would happen against Tony Ferguson, meaning tactically he's got to figure out one tricky, slick, unorthodox guy. And he has to be successful one time when all his chips are on the table, when everything's on the line. That's when he tends to break down. And if you look at the Rafael Dos Anjos fight, he got blown. It was a title fight. He's finally there, and he gets blown out in 1 minute of the first round. Title eliminator against Tony Ferguson. He just never got out of first gear. Against Nate Diaz, he never got out of first gear. It seems like when all eyes are on him, when everything's up for grabs and a title shot's coming or it is a title shot, he just doesn't fight well. So, tactically speaking, Justin Gaethje is the kind of guy Cowboy generally does well against. The straightforward brawler. But we're in a situation where, is this a title eliminator? For Justin Gaethje, probably. Meaning, if Justin Gaethje wins, certainly if he has a devastating performance against Cowboy, he could be next in line after the Tony Ferguson fight. The problem is, that's a long way away. Khabib just fought Dustin Poirier. He's got to get through Ferguson. Please, God, let that fight happen finally. And then maybe beat Gaethje. Gaethje would have to take a fight in between. So would I call this a title eliminator? No. Is the winner maybe next in line? Maybe. Are they in the conversation? For sure. For a title shot or a big money Conor fight? For sure. So, the flip side of this coin, beyond the tactics, where I give Cowboy a good shot, is the pressure aspect. Cowboy doesn't fight well under pressure. If you put Cowboy Cerrone up against a 5 to 15 fighter at a UFC Fight Night main event for the rest of his career, he would do great until Father Time caught up with him. Period. He always does well under those circumstances. Give him a million Yancy Medeiros and Rick Stories and these step forward and, bang kind of guys and put him main event and a fight night, the guy's golden. It's when everything's on the line and he feels there's a lot of pressure on him, something comes out of him where he doesn't have great performances. So the psychological aspect of this, which I find fascinating, is, does he see this as a must-win fight? Does he see this as a title eliminator? Does he see this as, man, if I don't win this, I may be on the back nine of my career, this may be a serious slide? I don't know the answer to that question. The only one who does is Cowboy Cerrone. I don't know him. I've met him. Very nice guy, by the way. He's one of the guys where what you see is what you get. The Cowboy Cerrone you guys all know from the video clips is the guy you talk to when you sit down with him. He isn't really any different. Very nice guy. But how does he see this fight? Is he putting a lot of pressure on his own shoulders? Because when he does that, he just doesn't fight well. When he's relaxed, when he's buddies with his opponent, when there isn't a lot on the line, he just has great performances most of the time. But when there's a lot of pressure, there's something in him where he just can't pull the trigger and he tends to shut down and not perform well. So I don't know how he sees this fight. That's the important thing. I don't know how he sees this fight. So from the Justin Gaethje angle, Justin Gaethje, step forward power puncher. In his last two fights, 2-0, both knockouts. And the important thing about those two fights is they're the first two fights in his UFC career where he wasn't in trouble. Edson Barboza and James Vick, he knocked them both out quickly. Wasn't a lot of back and forth. There wasn't this big exchange where he's hurt and he's rocked and he had to come back. There wasn't any of that. Of course, losses to Poirier, lost to Eddie Alvarez. Won against Michael Johnson, but once again, a back and forth fight where he was seriously hurt. So the last two fights, 2-fight streak, that's modest. It's nice. A big name in Edson Barboza, not a huge name in James Vick. Remember going into that fight, there was a lot of hype behind James Vick as maybe, the next big thing in terms of division. So there's certainly respectable wins and it's a respectable streak. I think it's the method. The way those fights looked. They were quick. They're both over in the first half of the first round. And when he knocked out James Vick, it looked like he was chopping down a sequoia. Boom. Tall James Vick just falling over. His head hit the ground before anything else. That kind of knockdown. That's impressive. Edson Barboza, that's impressive. He leveled him very quickly. And Edson Barboza, as we saw in the Paul Felder fight, still has something left in the tank. This wasn't a guy who had been through too many wars. He was kind of spent, kind of the veteran who can't defend himself anymore. We saw in his last fight against Paul Felder, whether or not you thought he won or lost that fight, he certainly looked good. He certainly looked like he can still compete at 155 pounds against the elite competition. So, impressive couple of wins. Has Cowboy faced opposition that was on a better streak? Yes. Has he faced more versatile opposition? Yes. So, Gaethje's in the right place in terms of momentum, but it's nothing Cowboy hasn't dealt with before. It's just how much is Cowboy hyping this fight up in his own mind? That's a huge factor to me. I think Gaethje is approaching this fight the right way. I think he respects Cowboy Cerrone. You can't help but respect a veteran like that. He doesn't think it's going to be a walkover kind of fight. I don't think he believes that Donald Cerrone is a spent force. So those are the factors I'm looking at now. I think stylistically this would normally favor Cowboy. I think the position they are both in, that favors Gaethje. I think maybe the pressure aspect favors Gaethje. I don't think Gaethje has a whole lot of it. The other factor, 2 times post-fight, I've seen somebody devastated in a way that was beyond losses. Now, this is a psychological thing that's beyond fighting. It's everybody faces it at some point. The reason you get into any profession, partly, is to see how far can I go with this. You might become a lawyer because you like the law and you're good at it, or whatever the reason is. But part of you says, how far can I get in law? Will I be a partner at a major firm in New York City, or will I be a public defender in the middle of nowhere? We all are trying to find out where we can go in our particular profession. A fighter has much less time to figure that out, and the results can be a lot more dramatic. If you're not a great lawyer by the time you're in your 40s, you might not ever be great, but there's still time to do it. There's no time limit there. And also, you can still make a living being a halfway decent lawyer. You don't need to be amazing at it. Fighters don't have that luxury. There's a very short window. The end can come very, very quickly, and it's hard to make a living if you're not at least on the elite level. When I called Tim Sylvia versus Fedor Emelianenko, I did the international feed for the Affliction fight, and the look on Tim Sylvia's face was one of, Fedor's here, I'm here, that's it. I will never get another chance at this. People remember me as a pretty good heavyweight UFC champion, but Fedor is going to be remembered as the best of all time, and I'm not there. It smacked him in the face where his legacy was in terms of mixed martial arts heavyweights. Undeniably, I'm never going to be as good as Fedor. When Roger Huerta fought Eddie Alvarez, a fight I called in Bellator, I remember Roger Huerta's face sitting on that stool. Eddie Alvarez is here, and I'm here. And that's it. Eddie Alvarez kicked his ass from pillar to post. And it's one of those things where it hits you in the face that I'm never going to get further than this. I might win fights, I might fight in organizations, whatever. Eddie Alvarez is a great lightweight, and I am not great. And what you wonder about with Cowboy, with his last fight against Tony Ferguson, is, have we seen him peak? Have we seen him, was it psychologically, or I don't see him easily getting another title shot. He would have to go on a really big streak. He's kind of set the precedent that when it comes to title eliminators and title fights, he doesn't have great performances. It's hard to shake that. Would the UFC get behind him for another title shot or another title eliminator when he's shown he underperforms in those kinds of fights? He underperformed against Ferguson. Now, Ferguson's a great fighter who had a great fight. But even a diehard fan of Tony Ferguson has to admit, Cowboy never really got into gear. He never really threw that much. He seemed overwhelmed from the beginning. Tony had a great performance. Can't take that away from him. But Cowboy really didn't offer much in terms of offense. And he has a tendency to do that. So with that loss, going back and facing, look, in those situations, I just don't fight well. Will that have a lingering effect on Cowboy Cerrone moving into this fight? That he's seen, look, I'm just never going to get, I'm always going to be a great fighter. I'm always going to be entertaining. I'm going to make money. I'm never going to remember it as an all-time great 155-pounder because every time those opportunities came up, he just didn't perform to the best of his ability. And regardless of how he sees the Gaethje fight, could there be a lingering down from having that in his face yet again? That was a clear title eliminator, and Cowboy just didn't show up for that fight. So, and remember, I'm a huge fan of Cowboy Cerrone. I just have to call it how I see it. He just didn't get his offense in gear. His offense in gear. When he is off or not firing on all cylinders, Cowboy just is a different guy. And that's why I call it good Cowboy and bad Cowboy. So that's the other psychological factor of this fight is there a lingering effect of Cowboy, my dog's having a dream and chasing something. Is there going to be a lingering effect of after the Ferguson fight, I'm probably never going to get into real title contention again. And he's not saddled with any of that. So my pick would be Justin Gaethje. How is he going to win? I don't know. Cowboy's a tough guy to knock out, typically speaking, especially at 155 pounds. I think Gaethje has what it takes to do it. So I'm definitely going with Gaethje in this fight. I think it's going to be incredibly entertaining. I wouldn't count Cowboy completely out, especially if he shows up in all these mental issues I've been talking about. If he puts those on the shelf, he could have a great fight because tactically, he has all the skills to win this fight. He has all the tools, and Gaethje has a lot of the offense he's seen before. So he certainly has the tools to do it, but I think psychologically everything's stacked against him. I think Gaethje's going in very, very free, very loose, and that's when he fights at his best. So I would go Justin Gaethje. We'll see if I'm right, but so many ins and outs to this fight that I can't wait to see it. And to see two fighters who love to brawl like this, who have technique, who do have tactical ability with so much on the I think that makes this fight very, very interesting. Let me know what you think.